by his partner, and as his approval ratings hit rock bottom in the polls. Yes, 2.5 hours to go until the polls close in Scotland. The question on the ballot: should Scotland be an independent country? All day long, there have been long lines outside polling stations in an independence referendum where 97% of the country's more than 4 million residents registered. We go to France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent in Edinburgh in a moment for an update on that turnout. Also joining us from the Scottish capital, Michael Keating, director of the Scottish Centre on Constitutional Change. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Also joining us from Glasgow, Anthony McGann of the University of Strathclyde's School of Government and Public Policy. Thank you for joining us. The France 24 debate, where your comments and reactions are always welcome on Facebook and Twitter, #F24Debate. Yes, our reporters mentioning it was an emotional moment at times today as people cast their ballot to decide whether or not to sever ties with Britain after 307 years.
Why is it such an emotional day?
Because I'm British. I have an English father, Scottish mother, born in England, live here. I'm British, I can be nothing else.
Today is the day that the working class people of Scotland begin the fight back.
We're Scotland, we make our own decisions. I've got my wee one, she's free now. I want her to have a good life when she's older. I don't want to worry about medical money or trying to educate her to a full extent, pal?
Let's cross over to Edinburgh and France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent. Catherine, tell us where you are.
Station in central Edinburgh, where people have been trickling in throughout the day. They say they've had a steady stream of voters, and round the city, much the same picture. Where we were earlier, there was a line of people waiting to queue up their votes, and again, lots of emotion there. People really enthusiastic about this vote. Lots of them saying they'd been waiting a very long time for this day. Those supporting independence, well, a lot of those people were very vocal, trying to stay positive, even though the latest opinion polls have been showing a lead for the no camp. The latest poll released on this polling day showed 53% to no, 47% to yes. But people for the yes camp remaining optimistic, saying they still believe in this and saying the polls have got it wrong.
And the polls open, Catherine, until 10 p.m. Just talk us through how it's going to happen before and after those polls close.
Well, we're expecting another rush of people after work. The polls do stay open until 10 p.m. and they really could get quite busy because we've heard that there could be a very high turnout here indeed. And more than 97% of eligible people in Scotland registered to vote in these elections. And we're seeing a very high turnout, so we could be set for some busy scenes. Then, after the polls close at 10 p.m, that's when the vote count starts, and that's going to go on throughout the night. Now, we're getting votes shipped in, sometimes by boat, from remote Scottish islands in the north. It'll be counted in 32 different stations around Scotland before being centralised. Around 5 or 6 in the morning here, we could be getting results from Edinburgh, Glasgow, and then Aberdeen. And once we know what the results are in those big cities, we will have an idea probably of whether Scotland has voted for independence. The final result probably due around 7 or 8 in the morning, breakfast time here, when it'll be announced officially.
All right, a long night in store. It's only just beginning. Anthony McGann, let me ask you, when the referendum on independence was announced, did you think it would come down to this nail-biter?
No, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be this close. All the polls suggested that, the yes campaign might be lucky to crack 40%. So in the last year, they've made a tremendous amount of progress. In the last month in particular, they've gained about 5 points in most polls. So, yeah, nobody expected it to be this close, except, of course, Alex Salmond.
Except Alex Salmond. And
yeah.
When you were today in Glasgow, what was your feeling when you walked past polling stations?
Well, I only walked past. I did walk past a few. The thing that I noticed in Glasgow is the overwhelming preponderance of yes stickers and yes signs in windows. I don't think Glasgow. However, this is Glasgow. Glasgow is probably one of the places where support for yes is stronger in Scotland. So I would kind of expect that actually.
Support stronger. Why is that? Glasgow, an industrial town. Why is the support for the yes camp stronger?
It's partially, well, it's that I think support for no is stronger in other parts in Scotland. The parts of Scotland close to the borders, it's stronger. If you take the Highlands, it's stronger because maybe people here feel if you live in the Highlands or Islands, Edinburgh is just as remote from you as London is. Glasgow is in the centre of Scotland. And you know, in independent Scotland would be much more. Glasgow would have a much stronger, much more dominant position in this, I think.
All right, on the final day, Catherine Norris-Trent a minute ago mentioning the polls that are coming out on the last day, 53-47. You were telling us, Catherine. On the final day, there were also endorsements. The Yes Camp getting a boost with the tweet of tennis champion Andy Murray, and that's much to the delight. There you see it. Huge day for Scotland. No campaign negativity last few days. Totally swayed my view on it. Excited to see the outcome. Let's do it. That's much to the delight of the leader of the Nationalists, First Minister Alex Salmond.
I would say just how delighted I was to see that Andy Murray hit another winner today. Okay.
All right, let's go to Michael Keating in Edinburgh. Michael, do last-minute endorsements matter?
I very much doubt it. I think most people have made their minds up, and if they're going to be swayed, it's going to be by the arguments of the politicians and economic considerations.
Catherine Norris-Trent, is that what you've seen when you've spoken to people at the polls, that it's really about economic matters, or do you think on this election day, suddenly, people are more asking themselves about identity issues, about what it means to be Scottish?
For what I've seen from speaking to people at the polling stations and during campaigning, there are two big issues which are coming out. The economic issue is huge. People worried about the future and worried about their children's future. The capacity of the Scottish government and the Scottish nationalists to run the economy, that's certainly a factor there. There is another factor, though, which is that they just want change. They don't believe that the government down in Westminster can deliver for them, is representing them, and they want their power closer to home. So it's a rejection of London, of the major political parties. Even people on the left of the spectrum feel that the Labour Party has failed them, hasn't managed to get them enough prosperity and jobs and keep their lifestyles up to scratch. In terms of identity, Francois, it is complicated. We do hear people saying William Wallace and other Scottish heroes from the past, evoking them, saying William Wallace didn't die for nothing and things like that. That from a lot of younger voters. But it's practical concerns, the economy and alienation, which have been dominating when we've spoken to voters.
All right, Michael Keating, do you agree that it really is about economic considerations? I mean, that's what's said, but when you look at the statements, everybody quotes Adam Smith or quotes Robert Burns or quotes, you know, famous Scottish people.
I entirely agree with what's just been said, and you've got to remember Scottish identity is very strong, but it is shared by both sides. So the Unionist side also invoke Scottish history, they invoke Scottish heroes, they invoke Adam Smith, they even invoke Bruce and Wallace. So that doesn't really determine whether you support a yes or whether you support a no. There are real worries about the economy, about pensions, about the future, and what is going to happen to people's ordinary lives if there is a yes or if there is a no.
And agreeing with your perspective that it is a lot about what's best for the daily lives of people, Veronica, she says, I'm concerned that the Scottish will not get the freedom they are seeking without losing a great deal of benefits, as has been the case. Our viewers squarely divided over what's best going forth for Scotland. Anthony McGann, did you wake up this morning asking yourself, what is Scotland?
Not really. I mean, my mother's Scottish, my father's English. There's plenty of Irish on both sides. I have a very divided identity. I don't think this. I agree with some of the things that we said. I don't think this is about identity politics. I mean, the No campaign has made the campaign completely about economics. The Yes campaign is about self-governance. It's about not being governed from Westminster. In terms of the economics, the polls show that most people do not think they will be better off personally after Scottish independence. Nevertheless, despite winning this argument, the Yes campaign, or despite losing this argument, the Yes campaign is about neck and neck. For a lot of people, I think the self-governance issue is more important than the pure economics. And this, I think, is maybe the miscalculation the No campaign has made. They've based it on their arguments on economics, and they've lost a 20-point lead in a couple of months.
One reaction coming through: Scottish independence will prove to the world that British Prime Minister David Cameron is a big loser compared to other PMs. So some people putting some Westminster politics there into the arguments. And let me ask you about this question. Catherine Norris-Trent, we've seen it's been all hands on deck in the final couple of weeks with the politicians from Westminster scrapping Prime Minister's question time to come up to campaign. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown himself, Scottish, front and center. How do people feel about that?
Well, Gordon Brown actually made a real splash with his speech on the final day of campaigning yesterday. He really spoke in fiery terms, spoke for a long time, passionately, without notes, and it was very much praised by a lot of people, even Conservatives, also for the No campaign, of course, but even people who've been very critical of Gordon Brown in the past had to admit that he did make a good speech. And even some newspapers today saying that if the No vote wins, he could be the man who saved the Union. Gordon Brown, of course, is seen as old Labour, traditional Labour, to the left of that party, not so much associated with the centre-left of the party, perhaps keeping some of the values of the Labour Party. He's also Scottish, and he's still a constituency MP for the Westminster Parliament. And getting him on the campaign trail rather late in the day perhaps has given them a new lease of life.
All right, a lot of reactions coming in. One on Facebook from Bill. He says, it's déjà vu with the Quebec independence referendum. 49.5% yes, 50.5% no. The establishment wins again. All right, that's a prediction, by the way. We don't have any projections at this point from exit polls. But that's the way it did pan out in Quebec, and this idea that the establishment wins again. Anthony McGann, your reaction to that?
I doubt it. It may well be very, very close, but even if it's a no vote, what's happened in the last week, the polls being so close, has prompted the various Westminster parties, the various unionist parties, to offer further devolution to Scotland. This was quite a climb down, given that these parties had sort of, especially David Cameron, had refused to include further devolution on the original referendum. He insisted it would be a sort of like either yes or no, there being no option for no but further devolution. That there's going to be a lot, even if there's a no vote, there's going to be further negotiations about this. One of the things we found is that as Scotland has got greater power, the Scottish Parliament has got greater powers, support for greater devolution has actually increased. So I would expect further devolution to actually not close this issue, but actually, if anything, to have the opposite effect of actually sort of increasing support for still more devolution. So I don't think the Québécois kind of parallel quite works. Although I think in terms of the polls, it may be very close. A 48% 52 result doesn't necessarily mean victory for the establishment, though.
I was going to say, is a close result a nightmare scenario or a dream scenario for Britain as a whole?
I don't think. I don't think.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I don't think it's either. I think so. To some degree. Now, given the accommodations made by the unionist parties, the Yes campaigns in something of a no-lose situation. I'm sure if I was David Cameron, I would vastly prefer a 48 or 49.5% vote to a 50.5% vote. So from the point of view of the current British government, no, the nightmare scenario is 51% yes.
All right, comment coming into us from Twitter: say no is the only way to keep freedom and prosperity for Scotland. The yes is a bag of false dreams. Catherine Norris-Trent, if it is a close result, how have politicians from elsewhere in Britain been looking at it? Either way,
Well, if it is a very close result, either way, David Cameron could be in an awful lot of trouble in terms of his own political career. We're starting to hear from members of the Conservative Party down in London, rumblings of discontent, even some of them starting to say it openly. If David Cameron loses his side of this referendum, if the yes vote wins, his job, although not officially on the line, is very much in peril, on the speculation about how much time he could last. If it's a close no vote, he could also be very vulnerable. He's already had rumblings of discontent within his party over some of his policy issues. If he's seen of having gambled this away and gambled this referendum so it was almost too close to call, well, that could prove very risky for him. There's a general election, of course, due to come up in the UK in May 2015, and members of the Conservative Party may decide that they don't want him to be the leader to take them into that.
Catherine Norris-Trent, I want to thank you. I know that there's a lot more to do on your end, preparing, of course, for the close of those polls. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.
Thanks, Francois.
Michael Keating, let me ask you, at this point in time, picking up on the point just made by Catherine, there was one op-ed piece in the Financial Times this Thursday where an MP, a Conservative MP, made the argument for English devolution. And you heard just a minute ago Anthony McGann saying how the more devolution has been promised, the more it's become popular. Is it a Pandora's box, this devolution, and what will be the impact on Britain?
Well, I didn't hear Anthony. I can't pick up his feed here. But indeed, there has been a reaction in England. English opinion has come very late to this question of Scottish independence. And it's only during the campaign they started to think about it. But the idea of English regionalism, English government has been around for a long time. What we have seen has been the growth of a certain English nationalism in response to Europe and in response to Scottish nationalism, but it doesn't take a very coherent form. People say, well, an English parliament would be a good thing, but one can't imagine how an English parliament would coexist with Westminster. There was an attempt 10 years ago to regionalise England. It didn't attract a great deal of enthusiasm. So it's very difficult to sort this out until the English decide what they want for themselves.
All right. The issue of what happens next to the broader Great Britain, of course, married to the issue of what will happen not just for Scotland, not just for Britain, but also for Europe as a whole. A short while ago, the French president weighing in and saying he hopes it will be decisive for Europe. And that's drawn the ire of Paula on Twitter, saying, why is he intervening at this stage? Meanwhile, earlier, the White House weighing in against independence. They tweeted as well, saying the UK is an extraordinary partner for America and a force for good in an unstable world. I hope it remains strong, robust, and united. Those are a quote of Barack Obama. Are you surprised, Anthony McGann, to see so many foreign leaders weighing in this conversation?
I'm a little bit. Many people have taken the position that this is a sort of a local matter, a British matter, a Scottish matter to decide. I can certainly see how any change is not particularly. It's not something that will be welcomed by countries with whom the United Kingdom has strong relationships. In terms of how it plays here, it probably doesn't make much difference. Having people from outside say you shouldn't do this, if anything, I don't think that is going to sway the vote. I think actually the American comment is quite smart, and it's made very, very late, and too late really to become a matter of controversy. Comments by other European countries, especially various Spanish politicians, have have been noted, but had, I think, very little impact here.
Yes, the Spanish Prime Minister saying that this vote will torpedo the European spirit. Of course, he's saying that with an eye to Catalonia's own designs on holding an independence referendum. Anthony McGann, would you say that after this referendum, Scotland will be a more pro-European place or less?
Probably more pro-European. There isn't actually much appetite in Scotland to withdraw from the EU. There is a degree of appetite in England with UKIP and also within a certain wing of the Conservative Party to do just that. A lot of what's been said before the referendum has to be taken with a grain of salt. When you say something before a vote, you're hoping to influence the vote. What people will say after the vote, whichever way it goes, is a very different matter. Once the vote has happened, and it's sort of like you can't influence the outcome. So I wouldn't actually pay too much attention to what's been said by people outside the UK. In terms of being European, I think Scotland very much so views itself as being part of Europe, and the new Scottish identity that, say, the Scottish Nationalist Party would like to sort of endorse, I think, is very much so the idea that Scotland is part of Northern Europe.
Michael Keating, how will, if there is a yes vote, how will it weigh on that other referendum that's planned for 2017, the one on whether or not Britain stays inside of the European Union?
It has a big connection. Again, I didn't hear the last response, but it's important to remember that the pro-independence side in this debate is more pro-European than the Unionist side, because the Unionist side includes the Conservative Party, who these days are pretty Eurosceptic, and the Labour Party that are less than enthusiastic about Europe. And one of the arguments used by the Yes campaign in this referendum is that you need to become independent because there's a danger that you'll be dragged out of Europe by voters in England if the Conservatives win the next election and if they have a referendum on Europe and England votes no. And even if the no side wins tonight and there's a referendum on Europe and the Scots vote to stay in and the English vote to come out, that will reopen the whole question, and we'll probably have to have another Scottish referendum again.
Another Scottish referendum again. Another reaction coming in. Independence is about rights, responsibility, and hope. The No campaign was about the exact opposite on each point. Anthony McGann, I've heard one observer say, let's face it, the reason Westminster is for no is because it means they have less power.
Well, I think it's very, very difficult for a leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party to actually preside over the dissolution of the Union. It's kind of obviously, I mean, it's very difficult for a country to sort of like cede territory. So, yeah, I mean, it is not at all surprising. But what I found surprising is that there's been so little effort to actually really make a really positive case by the No campaign for the Union. The emphasis has all been on the costs of independence, how economically risky it is. It wasn't really until Gordon Brown's speech yesterday that you really heard someone saying, yes, the Union has a whole load of positive values, towards equality, towards these other things, a really strong sort of positive case for Scotland remaining part of a Union.
All right, and let me ask both of you before we go. I'll start with you, Anthony. What time are you going to bed tonight, and what time are you getting up in the morning? Seeing as we may get the results, some are predicting even it'll be as late as 8 a.m.
Oh, I'm not sure I'll be going to bed. I'll fall asleep in a seat.
You'll fall asleep in a seat. Michael Keating, will you be going to bed tonight as you wait for these results?
I will not be going to bed. I'm spending the entire night in a BBC studio and the entire day tomorrow on various media talking about the result.
All right. We'll give the final word in this discussion to one of the viewers. Petra saying the people in Scotland have to decide and nobody else should put its nose in. Well, that'll be certainly the case. Again, those polls closing at 10 p.m. local time. I want to thank our guests, Michael Keating, for joining us from Edinburgh. I want to thank as well Anthony McGann for being with us from Glasgow. Thank you for being with us, and stay with us, of course, because we're not going to bed, not by any stretch of the imagination, not with this vote going down to its last 2 hours before the vote counting begins.